Pelé is sobbing uncontrollably on the pitch at Rosunda Stadium. The final whistle has just blown, and the 17-year-old who carried an entire nation's broken dreams on his thin shoulders has collapsed into the arms of goalkeeper Gilmar. What happens in the next few minutes, and the choice he makes after the tears stop, will define what it truly means to be a legend. It was June 29th, 1958, in Stockholm, Sweden. The evening sky was pale and silver, the way it gets in Scandinavian summers, when the sun refuses to fully set. 50,000 spectators filled the stadium, most of them Swedes hoping to witness their national team lift the World Cup trophy on home soil. The air was cool, around 15 degrees Celsius, but the tension inside the tunnel beneath the stands was thick enough to choke on. Pelé stood in that tunnel, wearing the number 10 shirt that felt heavier than any fabric should. He was 17 years, 7 months, and 24 days old. Back home in Bauru, his father Dondinho, a former footballer whose career had been destroyed by a knee injury, was listening on a crackling radio, barely able to breathe. Pelé's mother, Celeste, had refused to listen. She was too afraid of what might happen to her boy so far from home. Brazil had never won a World Cup. 8 years earlier, in 1950, they had hosted the tournament and lost the final match to Uruguay in front of 200,000 people at the Maracanã. Grown men had wept openly. Some never recovered. The word Maracanazo became a scar in the Brazilian soul, a wound that refused to heal. Now, in this foreign country with its strange light and unfamiliar language, the weight of that failure pressed down on every Brazilian player, but it pressed hardest on the youngest. 30 minutes before kickoff, Pelé had been lying on a wooden bench in the locker room, staring at the ceiling. His legs were shaking, not from cold, from fear, pure, paralyzing fear. Didi, the veteran midfielder, noticed the boy trembling and walked over. He sat down beside Pelé and said nothing for a long moment. Then quietly, "You know what my grandmother told me before I left for my first big match?" Pelé didn't answer. His throat was too tight. She said, "The ball doesn't know how old you are. The ball doesn't care if you're scared. The ball only knows if you love it. Do you love the ball, Menino?" "More than anything," Pelé whispered. "Then go show it. That's all. Just show the ball how much you love it." Pelé sat up slowly. He looked around the locker room at the faces of men who had become his brothers over the past month. Garincha with his crooked legs and mischievous grin, Vava with his powerful shoulders, Zagallo with his quiet intensity. They were all afraid too. He could see it in their eyes, but they were going out there anyway. The tunnel smelled like wet concrete and old sweat. As the two teams lined up side by side, Pelé found himself standing next to Niels Lidholm, the Swedish captain. Lidholm was 35 years old, a master of the game, a man who had seen everything football could offer. He looked down at this child beside him and smiled. "Nervous?" Lidholm asked in accented Portuguese. Pelé nodded, unable to pretend otherwise. "Good," Lidholm said. "Fear means you understand what this moment is. But I'll tell you something. Once you touch the ball, the fear will disappear. It always does." It was a small kindness from an opponent, a gesture of respect across the battlefield. Pelé never forgot it. The teams walked out onto the pitch, and the sound hit Pelé like a wave. 50,000 voices roaring, most of them cheering for Sweden. The grass was thick and green, still damp from an afternoon drizzle. The stadium lights had begun to glow against the pale sky, creating an almost dreamlike quality to everything. Then disaster struck. 4 minutes into the match, Sweden scored. Lidholm himself slotted the ball past Gilmar with the calm precision of a surgeon. The stadium erupted. Swedish flags waved everywhere, and for one terrible moment, Pelé felt the ghost of 1950 rising up from the grave. He looked at his teammates. Some had their heads down. The old fear was creeping back in, the fear that Brazil was destined to fail when it mattered most. But then something remarkable happened. Garincha, the man they called the joy of the people, started laughing. Actually laughing, right there on the pitch, moments after conceding a goal in the World Cup final. "What's funny?" Pelé asked, confused. "They think they've won because they scored first," Garincha said, his eyes twinkling. "They have no idea what's coming. Neither do you, Menino. But you will. Just play. Just play. 5 minutes later, Vava equalized. The Swedish defense had no answer for Brazil's fluid musical style of football. The ball moved like it was dancing, passed with a rhythm that seemed almost supernatural. Pelé began to feel it, that sensation when fear transforms into something else entirely. His legs stopped shaking. His mind went quiet. Everything around him slowed down, and the ball became the only thing that existed. In the 32nd minute, Vava scored again. Brazil was ahead. The impossible was becoming possible. But the moment that changed everything, the moment that turned a talented teenager into a global legend, came in the 55th minute. Pelé received the ball with his back to the Swedish goal, near the edge of the penalty area. A defender was tight on him, breathing down his neck. There was no obvious pass, no clear path forward. What happened next took approximately 4 seconds. Pelé flicked the ball up with his chest, over the head of the defender. Then he spun around the shocked player, let the ball drop, and before it touched the ground, before anyone in the stadium could understand what they were witnessing, he struck it with his right foot and sent it screaming into the net. Chest, lob, spin, volley, goal. The stadium went silent. Not the silence of disappointment, the silence of disbelief. 50,000 people who had just witnessed something that shouldn't be possible, something that belonged more to imagination than to reality. Then, slowly, something beautiful happened. The Swedish fans, the same people who had come to watch their team win, began to applaud, not politely, but genuinely, with the recognition that they were watching something sacred. They were watching the birth of the greatest player the world had ever seen, and even in defeat, they understood they were lucky to be there. Pelé scored again in the 90th minute, a header that sealed Brazil's 5-2 victory. When the final whistle blew, he didn't celebrate. He couldn't. 8 years of national grief, 17 years of dreams, and 90 minutes of the most intense pressure imaginable all came crashing down at once. He fell to his knees and wept. Gilmar reached him first, wrapping his arms around the boy who was still, in so many ways, just a boy. "You did it," Gilmar kept saying. "You did it, Menino. We did it." But Pelé wasn't crying from joy alone. He was crying because of the weight that had been lifted, because of his father listening thousands of miles away, because of all the people in the favelas who would hear this news and believe, maybe for the first time, that anything was possible. The celebration that followed was chaos. Hugs, tears, champagne, singing. But amid all of it, Pelé did something that revealed who he truly was beneath the talent. He sought out Niels Lidholm. The Swedish captain was standing alone near the tunnel, his head bowed, processing the defeat. Pelé walked over to him, this 17-year-old approaching a 35-year-old legend who had just lost the most important match of his career. "Thank you," Pelé said quietly. Lidholm looked up, surprised. "For what?" "For what you said in the tunnel. About fear and about touching the ball. You were right. It helped me." Lidholm studied the young Brazilian for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. "You're going to be the greatest there ever was," Lidholm said. "I saw it tonight. The whole world saw it. Remember this feeling, young man. Remember what it cost you to get here. And never let success make you forget who you were before you had it." Pelé shook his hand and never forgot those words. That night, in a small hotel room in Stockholm, Pelé finally got through on the telephone to his father in Brazil. The connection was terrible, full of static and delay, but he could hear Dondinho crying on the other end. "Papa," Pelé said, his voice breaking again, "I did it. For you. For everyone who told you your dreams were finished when you hurt your knee. I did it for all of us." Dondinho couldn't speak for almost a minute. When he finally found words, they were simple. "You didn't do it for me, son. You did it as yourself. That's the only way greatness ever happens. I'm proud of you. But more than that, I'm proud of who you are when no one is watching. Who you are when no one is watching." Pelé carried that with him for the rest of his life. In the decades that followed, Pelé would win 2 more World Cups. He would score over 1,000 career goals. He would become the most famous athlete on the planet, a symbol of joy and possibility, and the beautiful game. But he never forgot that night in Stockholm. He never forgot what it felt like to be 17 and terrified, to carry an entire nation's broken heart into battle, to transform fear into flow and pain into something transcendent. Years later, when asked about that match, Pelé would say, "That night I learned that greatness isn't about being unafraid. It's about being afraid and playing anyway. It's about letting the fear move through you instead of stopping you. And it's about remembering, even in your greatest moment, that the person standing next to you, even your opponent, deserves your respect and your kindness." The 1958 World Cup final changed Brazil forever. It healed a wound that had been open for 8 years. It gave hope to millions of children in the favelas who suddenly saw that someone who looked like them, who came from nothing like them, could become something like Pelé. But perhaps more importantly, it revealed a truth about legacy that goes beyond trophies and records. Legacy isn't just what you achieve, it's how you carry yourself in the moment of achievement. It's the kindness you show to your opponent when you've won and they've lost. It's remembering your father's sacrifice when the whole world is chanting your name. It's understanding that the ball doesn't care about fame. It only knows if you love it. Pelé loved it more than anyone ever had. And on that pale June evening in Stockholm, with the weight of a nation on his teenage shoulders and the ghosts of 1950 watching from the shadows, he showed the world what that love could create. Sometimes the greatest legends aren't born from confidence. They're born from fear that refuses to surrender, from talent that finally trusts itself, from a 17-year-old boy who lay trembling on a locker room bench, stood up anyway, and changed football forever. Pelé walked off that pitch as the youngest player ever to win a World Cup final. But more than that, he walked off as proof that dreams don't require permission. They just require someone brave enough and afraid enough to chase them. If this story of courage, fear, and transformation moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that being afraid doesn't mean you can't become legendary. It means you're human. And let us know in the comments, what moment in your life required you to be afraid and move forward anyway? What did you learn from that fear? Don't forget to ring that notification bell for more untold stories about the moments that reveal the real humanity behind football's greatest legends.